Hi, my name is Zachary Pena. I'm the current president of the Online Business Student Association. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out to this video, viewing this video. This is the first workshop of our workshop series. I'd like to welcome everybody. It's called Ace the Interview, Confidence and Conversation Skills. The first thing I want to mention about interviews is that I know they can be very intimidating and very stressful and nerve-wracking, but it's very, very important not to panic. And the best way to combat being nervous and panicking is just being very prepared and learning how to interview very well. The best way to do that is by attending workshops like this and practicing interviews with the career coaches, people that are going to give you feedback and insight into what interviewers are really looking for. For example, you can do a lot of interviews throughout your lifetime, throughout your career, but you won't necessarily understand why you didn't get the job. And without getting that feedback, you'll never really be able to grow into a strong interviewer. And the benefit of being a strong interviewer is that you'll be able to get better jobs, jobs you enjoy a little more, and higher paying jobs versus jobs that you may currently have at the moment. Interview skill shots will place emphasis on saying the right words. The reality is that confidence is the key. So today we're going to talk about planning your first impression, sell your strengths, preparing speaking points, don't just be a script, showing enthusiasm and being curious, being a good storyteller, ending on a good note, not just being interviewed, but also asking questions, as well as how your posture positions your attitude. Interviews come in a variety of forms, in person, over the phone, and even in video calls now. So there's advantages and disadvantages to each form of this type of interviewing. You might notice that you have exclusively in-person interviews, exclusively over the phone, exclusively video call interviews, or a combination of all three. I personally have had both, exclusively one or the other, and a combination of all three over my career and interviews that I've had. So some of the advantages of in-person interviews are that you get that one-on-one connection, that real chemistry. They can see your body language, you can see their body language. You can really determine how well it is going. The disadvantage is, for a lot of people, again, is a little more intimidating, a little more nerve-wracking, but just being confident and prepared is going to shine through, and you will be less nervous going forward with interviews. The advantage of over the phone is that you are a little less nervous, but you're not picking up on those social cues, that chemistry. You're not seeing their body language, and they're not seeing your body language. So it's very hard to gauge necessarily how enthusiastic or interested the person is based on their body language. So the over the phone interview is going to come from a lot of tone of voice and just excitement with how you talk to the interviewer. The advantage of over the phone though, is that since they can't see you, you have a lot more preparation, and you can look at your bullet points, your notes, your speaking points without them knowing that you're referencing those. And that's very beneficial if you get kind of caught off guard or stuck in a difficult question that you need to answer. And a video call is kind of a hybrid. It's a nice balance of the two. So it's not as nerve-wracking as in person, but you still get the advantage of looking at the camera, and you can put little bullet points or notes above the camera, to the sides of the camera, or even below the camera. So it looks like you're still looking at the interviewer, but you have those reference points in front of you. What makes a strong first impression? Interviewers don't want a recap of your resume. They want to know why you're the most relevant and interesting person for this job. So give them what they want. You're in control, and you get to decide what parts of your story to emphasize, and in turn, what they will focus on. Focus on your growth and strengths in personality and past roles. People are adaptable. So what this slide is really saying is that the interviewers have seen your resume, they know exactly what's on there, and it looks similar in some ways to a lot of other resumes. So they want to know what makes you stand out that's not on your resume and isn't easily put on the resume, for example. A lot of interviewers may ask, tell me something about yourself that isn't on your resume that you think I should know for this position. So shows that you're very qualified for this position. And a great way to kind of introduce a lot of things that aren't on your resume that you want to tell your interviewer is in the tell me about yourself question. So from here is very open-ended. It's important not to get off track and talk about things that aren't necessarily related to the job itself. So what you're gonna wanna talk about is past experiences, specific feedback from management that they've given you. I like LinkedIn recommendations a lot. That's a nice way for them to verify and see that you have been highly recommended by some of your past employers, and use numbers and specific examples. So say, I led a multi-million-dollar project that we delivered 2 weeks early, and the client was very satisfied. In my quarterly review, my manager said this and this about me. So get very detailed and specific, and be very enthusiastic and confident in your capabilities and your skill set. First, state the facts of what you accomplished. Second, quote others. In an interview, talking about your strengths isn't obnoxious. It's not bragging or being too forward. It's an essential skill to master if you want the job. Again, this is just a skill that you need to keep practicing, keep working on to the point where you're very prepared, you're comfortable speaking to an interviewer. You can practice with career coaches, as I said. That's really the best way because they're going to give you specific feedback and they know the industry trends, what's really popular, what questions are probably going to be asked, and how to appropriately answer those questions. Because again, you can have interview after interview, and if you just keep not getting the job, you don't necessarily get that feedback from the interviewer themselves, especially in large corporations where they're trained to not give that feedback to the prospective employee. So it's definitely an essential skill that you want to master, and that's going to help you just succeed in your career and live a more fulfilling and happy future and career going forward. And again, quoting others, just LinkedIn recommendations are one of my personal favorites. Very easy to verify, very easy for them to look on your LinkedIn and see that you are highly recommended by previous people. And the way I like to go about asking for a LinkedIn recommendation is that I tell them a little bit, the person I'm asking, a little bit about what I'm looking for in specific. So saying, if you could write a LinkedIn recommendation talking about my leadership and my skill set on this specific job and role, and then also making it kind of quid pro quo. So in return, offering to write them a LinkedIn recommendation, which is something I always do after they give me the initial LinkedIn recommendation. Enthusiasm and curiosity cannot be faked. If you are less experienced, target your transferable skills and highlight eagerness to learn. So this is a great example of when you get, especially coming out of college, you might not necessarily have a lot of experience working in the field you want to. So being able to turn a negative into a positive is a great skill to have here. So if they say, why should we hire you because you really don't have any experience in this industry, you can say, I know that I don't have a lot of work experience, but I am very interested, very eager to learn. I was always very adamant and excelled in my classes in these subjects. And again, if you can quote specific projects that you worked on that really transfer into that career position, that's excellent. And just really selling to them that all of the skills you've built up to this point are very transferable and very applicable to the position that you're applying for. And turning that negative into a positive again, where you're just very eager over the next year to learn as much as you can the next couple years, to keep learning and just getting better at the position. They're really going to appreciate that. And they'll like the fact that you're able to turn something that was initially a negative in their mind into a positive in their mind. Storytelling. Be a creative problem solver. Interviewers are trying to get a feel for whether you would be a passionate, strong performer if you were hired. Make your story concise and engaging. So keep it under 2 minutes. Use I, not we. Example, I came up with the solution, but only if you did. We don't want to fabricate the truth. We don't want to tell straight up lies to the interviewer. A lot of times they will be able to look into these to verify what you're telling them. So if they find out that you lied about specific details, then you're definitely not going to get that job. Think of your story as the start of a dialogue, not monologue. If they ask follow-up questions to dig deeper, you know you've succeeded. And again, the best time to really narrate the story and kind of steer the direction of the interview is in that initial tell me about yourself. So for example, talk about leadership roles you've had that really demonstrate how you've gone above and beyond. Talk about projects where you led the group. Anything that can transfer and is applicable to the position you're applying for is going to look really great in the interview and to the interviewer. Tell a good short story. Keep your story in line and organized. How can you be prepared but also authentic and spontaneous? Bullet points. Don't script responses word for word. Simply capture a few bullet points that communicate the most important points for commonly asked questions. Sometimes it can feel like you're at the mercy of the interviewer says skillings, but if you go in feeling comfortable with your speaking points and the things that you want them to remember about you, it gives you an opportunity to be strategic and proactive. So again, especially if it's a phone interview, a video interview, having those bullet points, not necessarily a script where you're reading word for word, because that's going to seem robotic. It's going to sound scripted, and they're going to notice that your eye contact is off the camera. So even though right above, right to the side is close enough where you can glance, they're going to notice if you're not looking at the camera for a prolonged period of time. So we definitely don't want that. And those bullet points are just to kind of keep you on track, keep you ignite kind of the thought process for the conversation going forward. Don't have a one-sided conversation. Interview them as well. End on a positive note by asking something like, what do you think are the most important qualities for someone in this role? So again, this is an interview. They're seeing if you're the best employer for the position, but at the same time, especially if you have multiple interviews, you're seeing if this is the best company for you. So it does go both ways. You don't necessarily want to accept a position if you find out in the interview that it's not really what you're looking for company-wise. So a great question I like to ask employers when I'm being interviewed is, what is the company culture like at this company? If I find out that the culture is not very open, it's not very responsive, there's no communication, no feedback, that's not necessarily a company I want to work for. If I find out the culture is very open, everybody talks to each other and everybody grows together and is willing to help out, then that's an excellent culture that I'm looking for. And that's something that's going to be very personal to you. So just figuring out beforehand, what kind of company do I want to work for, culture-wise, employee-wise, work ethic-wise, all of the above. Also, another question I like to ask employers is how they got to that position and what was their deciding factor on accepting that position with the company. A lot of times you'll get great insight and they'll tell you, because they've also been through the process, they've had multiple interviews, they had options lined up as well. So really figuring out from them why they like the company so much and why they've either accepted the position or have been there for 5 plus 10 years, which is less common nowadays than it was in the past. So for example, my most recent internship was with a company called Cigna over the summer. And one of the trends I noticed that a lot of the employees, even the younger employees about our age, have been there for 5, 10 plus years. And they all said that they were there because of the culture. So right away, that was one reason that I really decided to go with that company. And that's something I highly recommend you do in your interviews as well. Also, they're going to ask you if you have any questions. And if you don't have any questions, that's not really a good sign. They're not going to be very impressed if you don't have any questions for them about the company or the position and all of the above. The key is in the details, dressing the part and position yourself. Posture, posture, posture. Dress the part, act the part, seal the deal. So here it's very important to understand that you have to look very well, professional, especially depending on your industry. If you're in a corporate setting or you're going for kind of a finance, accounting position, that's going to be a little more old school in a sense, where they want you to dress up and really be clean shaven, look the part. And you don't necessarily have to shave completely, but just keeping the beard nicely trimmed, keep the hair very nicely organized. And it doesn't have to be very expensive to look well, to dress well for the interview. I know that a lot of schools have kind of dress for success programs. So for example, my previous 2-year college had, the Career Center had like a dress for success program where I actually went in and I picked up a couple ties, a couple shirts, and a couple jackets just for some of the interviews, because if you go into the store, especially on a student budget, it can be very expensive and sets you back a little bit. So looking for those Career Center opportunities where they have programs like that is really something nice, and it just helps you going forward looking very professional. Wardrobe doesn't have to mean spending riches. Simple habits like basic hygiene and wearing fitted clothing can help you look polished and put together. Rehearsing what you want to say can help eliminate any stuttering or nervousness. The more you know what you say, the less uncertainty will be conveyed in your voice. Again, this is just with using those Dress for Success programs. Also, posture. Can't emphasize that enough. If you're slouching, you're going to look less interested, less professional. If you're sitting up straight and you're leaning forward slightly, it's going to seem like you have their full attention, they have your full attention. It's going to seem like you're very interested. And there's a lot of videos and research that supports posture and how that affects your attitude overall. So even just changing your posture a little bit is going to change your mindset. And again, helping you feel more confident and comfortable in the interview. And then rehearsing what you say. So going in and really having a good sense of what your talking points are going to be, and only using the bullet points when you really need to, instead of having it feel like a dry run, like a fresh time going through. And something that a lot of people do when they're nervous or they're not prepared, they use filler words such as like, well, and you don't necessarily notice it that much when you're speaking, but other people notice it a lot. So the interviewer is definitely going to notice if you're not prepared, if you're using a lot of filler words such as like, and that could be the making or breaking between you and another candidate that is just as excellent on paper, has just as much experience, but they were a little more prepared for their interview and they rehearsed what they wanted to say. And sometimes, I'm sure we've all been there, you're watching someone present and it gets so bad to the point where you even start counting. That was the 10th time they said like, or that was the 11th time they said and it's very distracting. At the end of it, you don't even remember what the presentation was about. So definitely rehearse and practice. Remember, you can fake confidence, but you cannot fake being your best self. Thank you for coming to our workshop series, ASU Online Business Student Association. Everybody, I hope this helped. Have a great day.